What are near-death experiences? Are they glimpses into the afterlife, or are they simply hallucinations created by the mind? Let's find out. I'm Dr. Prashant Sharma. Welcome to Finding Aum, the channel all about combining mental health and spirituality to live a more meaningful life. So, there have been a number of studies done on near-death experiences, or NDEs, and you might be surprised that the whole body of scientific literature is actually quite reliable. I was particularly drawn to one by Dr. Jeffrey Long in 2014. I'll include a link in the episode description for everyone. He looked at experiences of folks who were unconscious, near death, and may have required resuscitation. The study had some requirements. One of them was the experience had to be reasonably lucid and vivid, so no fragmented or disorganized memories, no hallucinations or things like that. And directly from his writing, he says, quote, NDEs occur at a time when the person is so physically compromised that they are typically unconscious, comatose, or clinically dead. NDEs are often associated with cardiac arrest. Now keep in mind, in the 10 to 20 seconds after a cardiac arrest, there is no measurable brain cortical electrical activity, so a prolonged, detailed, lucid experience shouldn't be possible, but it happens. Now, let's look at some of the different aspects of NDEs, since this will help us understand why they're so significant. One of the most fascinating things about NDEs is the out-of-body experiences that people have. So almost half of the people in the database reported seeing events in the world from outside of their own bodies, sometimes hovering over their bodies. A lot of these folks were extremely accurate in describing the details of their own resuscitation. So this person is literally having a heart attack, is having CPR done on them, and medications are being administered to them through their IV, yet they're able to describe these events happening in great detail. How is that possible purely from a physiological or brain function perspective? As a psychiatrist, I have no idea how to explain that. Another very interesting thing is that there have been NDEs in individuals who are blind from birth. One study looked at case reports of 9 individuals who were blind from birth, who described NDEs that were extremely vivid with content similar to other NDE reports. Here is a report from a young girl named Marta, who was blind from birth, and this is about an NDE she experienced after nearly drowning in a lake. She explained, quote, I slowly breathed in the water and became unconscious. A beautiful lady dressed in bright white light pulled me out. The lady looked into my eyes and asked me what I wanted. I was unable to think of anything until it occurred to me to travel around the lake. As I did so, I saw detail that I would not have seen in real life. I could go anywhere, even to the tops of trees, simply by my intending to go there. I was legally blind. For the first time, I was able to see leaves on trees, birds' feathers, birds' eyes, details on telephone poles, and what was in people's backyards. Again, no idea how to explain this. These folks never had prior experiences of seeing the world. They're blind, and yet they had this completely lucid and vivid experience. This is overall a common theme in folks who are not blind in terms of the experiences being vivid as well. Many people who have NDEs describe colors more vivid than anything they've experienced before, and some described 360-degree vision, which I can't even begin to comprehend, but it's fascinating. Now, people who have had NDEs also experience what is called a life review, basically a replaying of life events from a third-person perspective. Now, rather than describe it, which I'll probably end up doing poorly, I'm going to quote one of the participants in the study. Quote, I went into a dark place with nothing around me, but I wasn't scared. It was really peaceful there. I then began to see my whole life unfolding before me like a film projected on a screen, from babyhood to adult life. It was so real. I was looking at myself, but better than a 3D movie, as I was also capable of sensing the feelings of the persons I had interacted with through the years. I could feel the good and bad emotions I made them go through. Dr. Long looked at 617 NDEs, and life reviews happened in 14% of them. Many of them included events that were long forgotten, but the person was able to remember it in vivid detail, so they were not hallucinatory or unrealistic. They were very much rooted in reality, events that actually happened in the past. Encountering deceased loved ones has been another theme in NDEs, even seeing family members who had died before the person experiencing the NDE was born. So this wasn't someone in recent memory, and in some cases, it was of people who didn't have a lot or any photos taken of them. So basically, it couldn't have been a vision formed by expectations of that person. Young children also have NDEs. This is important as kids usually don't have such firm religious beliefs or, conceptualizations of what life after death is or even what death is in itself. Interestingly, their experiences are extremely similar to older children and adults. Now, you might be thinking that is this a phenomenon that happens in the US only? Maybe Western countries, things like that. Now, interestingly, the NDE database questionnaire has been translated into 23 different languages, over 500 NDEs from non English languages all over the world, and the themes of NDEs around the world are very similar. So, regardless of pre existing religious or cultural beliefs, we are talking about Western and non Western countries, different religions, and also atheists. So, we're talking about an experience that is constant. Whether you're young or old, religious or non religious, no matter your gender, whether you're spiritual or not spiritual, it doesn't seem to really matter. Also, interestingly, 54% of folks having these experiences said large changes happened in their lives after the experience. People reported that they had reduced fear of death, increased belief in life after death, more interest in the meaning of life, acceptance of others, and they became more empathic towards others. So even an experience that might last minutes for the person, the changes last for years. This kind of reminds me of some of the research being done these days on psychedelics, where a brief experience lasts for years, but that's a topic for another video. Now, taking a moment to think about NDEs from a psychiatrist's perspective, I have certainly interviewed patients who have had hallucinations during life-threatening situations in the hospital. Most of the time, these experiences are quite distressing, and people who are admitted to places like the intensive care unit can even develop PTSD. That's how traumatic these hallucinations or delusions can be. But NDEs are very different from this phenomenon. NDEs are a calming experience that tend to center people more and create positive changes in the person's life, which from a physiological perspective is odd. When we're in a life-threatening situation that is traumatic, our amygdala, or the fear and worry center part of the brain, goes into overdrive. We're on edge, adrenaline is pumping, we're thinking about dying, right? But in these NDEs, people have a very different experience, and honestly, it's quite the opposite of a traumatic experience. So, what do we make out of all this evidence? Well, first of all, we cannot explain NDEs from a physiological or brain function perspective. When we're saying that the brain has no activity during these experiences, this is a phenomenon that is going on outside of the brain or our body. To me, this is in effect proof of the afterlife, but that is just my perspective and it can be debated. I guess people might argue that these experiences are a defense mechanism made by the mind during an extremely stressful time of being near death. Still doesn't explain the lack of brain activity during cardiac arrest, of course, or the out-of-body experiences, or really on any of the other lines of evidence that we've talked about. Now, what we do know is that these experiences are not hallucinations or fictional things made up by the mind. For me, the most compelling evidence is about those out-of-body experiences where people in the study were describing their resuscitations in detail. A person is having CPR done on them actively, is in cardiac arrest, yet is able to accurately describe the events happening around them, what the doctors and nurses are doing, details that they could not have known. Another very interesting aspect from a spiritual perspective is the life review. Being able to look over your life, look at the events that occurred, and being able to sense the feelings of others seems rather appropriate when you're in a way looking at your actions and learning from them. From the standpoint of looking at life as a series of lessons we learn, this certainly makes a lot of sense. Not only that, but the experiences of people who were blind from birth, having been able to see all of these experiences vividly and the scenes around them vividly and in detail is pretty amazing. Now, if you want to learn more about this in a way that's easily digestible, I highly recommend reading a book called Proof of Heaven by Dr. Eben Alexander. He is a highly trained academic neurosurgeon with tons of experiences who had his own NDE, which he describes in the book, and looks at it both from a scientific and spiritual perspective. He also looks at the scientific data on NDEs, and his take is very interesting. Now, I want to hear from you guys out there. What do you think about this topic of near-death experiences or NDEs? Leave a comment about what you think. Have you had an NDE yourself? Have you had a family member or friend who described an NDE to you? Or do you have your own viewpoint on all of this? Let me know. This is Dr. Sharma from Finding Aum. That's AUM, Awareness, Understanding, and Mastery, combining mental health and spirituality to live a more meaningful life. Thanks for watching.